Better start writing more notes.
Yeah.
For the last couple. Everybody wants Harper closed up.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Matt. Matt Hart.
Good, good. How are
Nice
you?
to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Thanks for sitting in tonight.
Oh, is it?
No one's concerned about,
It's a great town.
It is. Staff and everyone's been great.
Have a copy of that anywhere?
Oh,
I looked online and I didn't see what it was. Okay, so I'll look today.
Posted. Today we posted the agenda. Sure.
Ma'am, how are you?
Find that on the committee website if you need me. Make sure I get it. Okay.
I wouldn't mind if that went out, but they are.
I was one of the last people getting the only We're looking at analysis of phone bill. Leon, thousands of minutes of talking. No texting and no data. It caused us to go over.
Exactly, yeah, I know.
So they're ignoring it.
I mean, it's insane. I would say it's encouraging. I know, but I'm just telling you the response.
I know, I know.
I agree with you. I mean, it's encouraging.
No, no, no.
No, yeah, that one, yes.
Other town council, you get your own.
I know we made some changes, right?
Well, the next line,
Yeah, except for,
the next line is gonna be. Doug, I wanted to come, I was like, stuck with me.
How are you?
Now, you know what?
Yeah, good to see you. How you been?
Good. I was at the Beth Israel when you gave the speech. Oh, yeah, we saw it. We were like,
wasn't.
who's the good I mean, seriously.
New turbos?
Perfect, I'll shoot you an email.
How you doing, sir?
I'll live in you. Commit to too much. Overpromise.
This is not how I walk out.
You'll get the premise.
Yep.
Really bad experience.
Yeah? What town in Western? Oh, yeah. That's a pretty nice
Weston.
Western. Okay, sure, yeah. So my family, we went hiking out, last weekend, we went, Lakeville into Millerton.
Yep.
And then we hiked, mountain into Onyx. No, it was west of the 18. It was on the South Dakota Trail, so it's Race Mountain. Beautiful. All the way to the Adirondack. Yeah, it was just south of the. Yeah, no, it's really. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Oh, Mr. Williams?
Good to see you.
How was it? The sushi shrimp is fabulous. Six or nine.
No, but I mean, are they gonna have it on their menu?
Oh, I would think so. Council meeting.
So we're waiting on a court reporter.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Bueller?
Oh, did you?
Strike me as somebody who rides around well.
What did you have?
Winter's pleasure. Gotta get out there.
Yeah, my neighbors across the street from us.
My friend just moved in. Oh, yeah. little nostalgic.
Yeah, I love that.
Sleep.
So when you're paying paper, 20 years.
Okay. Those houses are nice.
Moving liberal.
I know.
Healthcare.
We ended up in West Hartford. Like singing out dance.
I just gave the shot. You invented the vaccine.
Okay, so we are going to call the 6:45 public hearing to order, and we are going to start with a roll call.
Mr. Barnes is absent, but we have Mr. Flynn.
Here.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Ms. Casperson.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. We have a presentation from the applicant. Let me just read for the record. Do you want to read for the record, number one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're going to hear an application, SDD 7-R117, on behalf of HHC Physicians Care, Inc., doing business as Hartford Healthcare Medical Group, lessee, and Polo West Hartford LLC, lessor owner, Robin S.C.A. Pearson, attorney, for a request to amend Special Development District Number 7, located at 324-348 North Main Street and 2495 Albany Avenue, West Hartford, to convert approximately 3,500 square feet of the lower level of the Whole Foods Market building from storage to office and physical rehabilitation use.
Thank you, Mr. David. Mrs. Pearson. Attorney Pearson, excuse me.
Good evening, members of the Town Council. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Robin Pearson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I represent the applicants that have submitted this application to you for consideration. The purpose of the application is to amend Special Development District Number 7, one of your earliest special development districts in the town of West Hartford. It has an address of 324-348 North Main Street and 2495 Albany Avenue, and it is known by most of us as Bishop's Corners Shopping Center. And it also contains the Conover office building, which has access off of Albany Avenue. The purpose of this application is to allow the Hartford Healthcare Rehabilitation Network, which is part of the Hartford Healthcare Medical Group, to be able to move to the lower level of the building I refer to as the Whole Foods building. which is building number 2 on the site plan that you have with the materials that were filed with the application, and to relocate the Anytime Fitness office portion of their operation further to the rear of the lower level to make room and the opportunity for the rehabilitation center to go to the lower level and still be able to be accessed from the upper level. That's the reason for having to relocate Anytime Fitness. No new uses are being added to the tenant mix, but with this change, Hartford Healthcare can give its operations at Bishop's Corner, which include, there are really 3 components of that, medical office, urgent care, and physical rehabilitation, can give them all their own spaces and allow for an expanded and newly outfitted areas for those particular uses. No changes are proposed to the exterior of the existing building other than new signage on the upper level. The changes proposed to the interior of the Hartford Healthcare Medical Group space on the upper level do not require a special development district amendment. If we weren't changing storage space or space that was storage space on the lower level to be able to accommodate the relocation of the rehab space to the lower level, we would not even need to be here in front of you this evening. So everything that's happening on the upper level, other than the increased signage for which we've requested a waiver, but anything else with regard to the upper level reconfiguration of the tenant space and outfitting of that space would not necessitate us coming before this council for an SDD amendment. The applicants technically are HHC Physicians Care, Inc., which is doing business as Hartford Healthcare Medical Group, that's the lessee, and Polo/West Hartford LLC, which is the owner of the Whole Foods building and is the lessor. I have already provided to S.C. Lebreau the sign affidavit, which indicates signs have been posted on the 2 street frontages, Albany Avenue and North Main Street, which are the frontages for this fairly sizable special development district area. And I have a number of people here this evening that care very much about this application and are sitting in the audience. I'd like to take an opportunity to identify them for you, though we don't anticipate we will all need to get up and make a presentation to you. They are, first, Peter Diadio, who you know is the owner of the Whole Foods building, and Karen Goyette is here. She is the Senior Vice President for Strategy and System Integration for Hartford Healthcare, which is the parent group for all these other related uses. Also here is Kirsten Jones. Kirsten is the president of the Connecticut market of Hartford Healthcare Go Health Urgent Care. So the urgent care component of the 3 tenants that they have in their building now, in their tenant space now. And Mark Parents is here also. He is the area director of Hartford Healthcare Rehabilitation Network. Jennifer Murnane is the project manager for Hartford Healthcare and has been instrumental in putting this whole application together. I also have here Scott Regina sitting in the back. You know Scott, he is the owner of Anytime Fitness Center, and Scott Hesketh is our traffic engineer, and Scott is the only one we'll let get up and speak tonight, unless you have any particular questions for any of the other participants. Quickly, I'd like to go through what's being requested here. As I indicated, the upper level is not something, the new layout that was proposed. It's part of the plans that you have. I'll refer you to this sheet, has the upper level layout. The only change that is of interest to you really is that there are 6 more exam rooms that are being added at this level, which technically necessitates 12 more parking spaces, and we'll go into that in a little more detail as we get into a discussion on parking. But even so, again, that's not something that would trigger our need to be before you, because that can be accommodated in the existing approvals that are, that govern this special development district. As you can see, it creates a very gracious layout. There's lots of room. There's a nice new welcoming area for clients to come in. And you can see from that upper level that there is access from there where people are directed down through the new elevator and stairwell to the lower level where the rehab center is. But again, it's accessed from the upper level. The changes shown include the elevator access to the lower level, reconfiguration and upgrade of the medical offices and urgent care spaces, utilizing the area that will be vacated by the rehabilitation center use. Overall, Hartford Medical Group is pursuing this, Hartford Healthcare Group is pursuing this because of a desire to enhance the experience for its clients, and also to make it a nicer environment for its employees. And for your purposes, it's important to note that this is, of course, a significant reinvestment. This is not a inexpensive undertaking that they are wishing to pursue. So it's a serious reinvestment in this particular special development district. Hartford Healthcare Medical Group indicates that the number of staff persons will remain the same as currently exists for the three uses. So the additional parking is triggered by the fact that they are creating 6 new medical exam rooms, but they're not intending at all to increase the number of staff persons. With the application under Exhibit F, we submitted a matrix prepared by Hartford Healthcare Medical Group, which indicates the staffing levels will remain the same. So looking at the lower level, we did submit today a new plan, which is the one that you should be looking at when you consider this application, with regard to the relocation of the Anytime Fitness office space to make room for the relocation of the Hartford Healthcare Rehabilitation Center. This new plan has additional, the only thing that's changed from the one that you received on Friday, September 1st, is some additional notation that I'll describe later in response to a property owner's request that we add some additional information. But that layout shows you quite clearly that the space for the rehabilitation center is approximately 3,500 usable square feet. You can see how it's laid out there. Again, no increase in staff. The operations will be the same as they were before, except in a nicer space with a little more room. You can also see quite clearly that people will enter that rehab space through the lower level lobby, where they will go in. There's a waiting room right there before they get into the rehab space. There is no direct access. There's no incentive for people to come in from the rear of the building on the lower level. And there is a corridor that's shown. We thought we would have a larger plan for you, but you do have the smaller versions in front of you. As you can see, there's a secondary access that goes out the back of the rehab space. It's needed for, you need 2 means of access and egress, and there's no change to the exterior of the lower level, where that they will come in, they'll go out an existing doorway that already exists at the lower level. However, I did talk to the planner, and we do want to note that it might be possible that the building code review may require that there be a door right here. We don't know that yet. If that's the case, it would just make for a shorter egress route, and there may need to be an access door there. So Todd asked that I put that on the record for you, which I am doing. So again, the only thing that's changing with regard to Anytime Fitness is the relocation of its office areas The existing Anytime Fitness portion stays the same, for which the fitness area was approved. The owner of the building is paying for the relocation of Anytime Fitness's offices to be able to accommodate the move downstairs of the rehab facility. The application does require a waiver of signage regulations or relief from the signage regulations. You received in the application package information on the signage that is proposed. You received both an existing conditions or current signage at the site, this rendering that was in your package, and you also have a rendering of the proposed signage. And what I'd like to point out to you is if you look at it, the proposed signage basically fills in where there's an empty portion of the facade as it currently exists. That proposed signage is, as the zoning enforcement officer noted, it's approximately 49.2 square feet larger than what would be allowed under strict application of the zoning code when you combine all the signage that then would be on the frontage of the Hartford Medical Group tenant facade. The zoning enforcement officer, Brian Public, said we should request a waiver, but he certainly didn't have any objection himself. He does sometimes have comments on proposed signage. He had none. We do believe that the signage that proposed makes a lot of sense. From a design perspective, it's very similar to existing signage on the building, so it's not going to stand out as something dramatically different. I think it's logical to have signage on that empty space, sort of balance out the signage as a design element on the front of the medical group, Hartford Healthcare Group tenant space. And it's important with regard to concerns that have come from both the Town Plan and Zoning Commission and an abutting owner that access to the relocated rehabilitation place be designated clearly as from the upper level and not confuse people and have them go around in the back and try and get into the rehab space from the rear, to not put any pressure on the parking spaces that are available to the rear of the building. So this signage will direct everybody to exactly the urgent care facility, which is now called Go Health, and the medical offices and the rehab space all on that upper level. So it serves as a wayfinding purpose and certainly makes sense if someone's coming into the center to try and locate the way to get to the lower level. Most importantly, I suppose, since this is a special development district and what you need to be considering when you decide whether this application is worthy of approval, particularly with this relief from the signage regulation, is whether or not the design elements are jarring or not appropriate for this site. And the Design Review Advisory Committee did review the entire application with particular emphasis on the signage, given that it is, different from or a little more signage than would be normally allowed. And it did indicate it had no issues with regard to signage. I was not at the Town Plan and Zoning Commission meeting. I don't know if they specifically addressed the signage, but they certainly did not express any concern about the waiver or the relief that was requested. So with regard to parking, I'd like to just address that with a bit of an overview before Scott Hesketh comes up and talks about it. In the application materials that were submitted, there was a fairly good discussion about the unique nature of this special development district in that it has been approved and has seen successive approvals over the years. Indeed, I think it's been at least a decade, maybe more, and has built into it a parking deficit of 119 parking spaces. What that means is early on, the council in its wisdom determined that given the nature of that shopping center and the fact that all of these various uses share parking, it wouldn't be necessary to have a space attributable in the parking area or be required for every single use in that shopping center, as they have various peak times of use and various types of uses. The 119 parking deficit, space deficit, has been in place for a long time. Currently, with this proposed application, the parking deficit would go from 76 to 88, which is well within the 119 parking space benefit or deficit that is already built into this center. As I mentioned to you, there's no increase in staff, and the only trigger requiring more parking spaces attributable to that deficit is the increase in exam rooms on the upper level, 6 more exam rooms. Importantly, we submitted with the application a parking lot study dated June 30, 2017, prepared by Scott Hesketh's office, F.A. Hesketh and Associates, and it indicated that having studied the parking lot over the years for various applications, there is always, notwithstanding the fact that everybody says there's not enough parking in that parking lot, there is always parking available. Now, it may be on the fringes where someone has to walk. It certainly is tight if you want to get within 3 spaces of Whole Food, but there is always parking available. So I'd like to ask Scott to come on up and just address what he has found with this study and studies over the years to substantiate that with this change, amendment to the SDD, you shouldn't expect to find any deleterious impact on parking situation in this SDD.
Thank you, Robin. For the record, Scott Hesketh from F.A. Hesketh and Associates. Our office is in East Granby, Connecticut, and I am the author of the June 30th, 2017 parking study, which has been submitted as part of this package. We were asked to go out and do some observations out at the site and count the number of available parking spaces at the site to determine if the need for the additional 12 parking spaces as a result of the proposed changes in the interior of the building can be accommodated. Our office went out between June 12th and June 23rd on 6 different days, made 20 different observations at different times. We've learned over the years at this particular site that the peak parking demand tended to be around the noon lunchtime hour. So on 4 of those days, or 5 of those days, we did counts during the lunchtime peak. We counted 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, 12:30, and 1 o'clock on many of those days. And our observations indicated that at no time were there fewer than 104 available parking spaces on the site during those peak periods. This proposal requires an additional 12 parking spaces. 12 is significantly less than 104, so we believe that this proposed modification, that the site has clearly enough parking spaces to accommodate this proposed change in use. And we had not only done counts during this recent period, but our studies had gone back all the way to 2002. We had done counts in October of 2002, in July of 2004, January 2006, and June 2012, and we always found a sufficient number of available parking spaces on the site. In fact, the previous low number was 133 parking spaces on the site, which occurred during July of 2004 and one time in October of 2016. So there's clearly enough available parking on the site to accommodate this proposed change. And with that, I'll be available to take any questions the commission may have regarding the parking study. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Escoffier. I think we do have questions for you, a couple people. Mrs. Hall had one.
If this is the appropriate time, I'll be happy to do that. Yep.
Is this okay, Attorney Pearson? Okay.
Mine is just very quick. Were any of the studies done after Bertucci's left and the new restaurant came in? I don't know. I haven't had any insight on how popular the new restaurant is and whether there's any change in volume there because of that.
Okay, this was in the middle of June of 2017 was the last round of counts that we did. And I'm told by the owners that, yes, the new tenant was in place at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Okay. Yep. I guess, well, I had one question before Mr. Winograd goes. Were all of these done in the spring, summer, and any with snow or anything with?
All the
snow
recent
around?
observations were in June of 2017, so there was no snow on the ground at that time.
Okay, Mr. Winograd.
Thank you. Just one question. With the additional usage, is there any change in the requirements for handicap parking? In other words, based on who's might be using the new facility, does that change anything?
I'm not aware that there were. Staff didn't indicate that there were.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of people had that question, Mr. David. I've had that question also, so, Mr. David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to address the concern you raised and the concern Mr. Winograd raised. So with respect to the snow storage, anybody who's lived in that corner, West Hartford, over the years notices that all the snow gets pushed into the corner in a very large heap of snow gets pushed in the corner closest to North Main, heading south. So I'm wondering, do you have any knowledge as to how many spaces are used for snow storage? Because it's usually not trucked off-site.
Well, snow is typically pushed toward the corner of parking lots in the initial time frame after the storm. If it's a snow that's a very large snow that would linger for a period of time, the property owners typically hire companies to come in with backhoes and such. I know there is a snow storage area identified to the rear of the lot. So in those instances where there's 1 or 2 inches of snow, you'll get small piles in the corners, and it'll tend to melt over a couple of days. If you have a large storm, 10, 12, 14 inches, generally they'll move it off to the side initially, and then when they have a little bit more time, they hire people to come in with backhoes and such and either truck it off-site or bring it back to the snow storage area toward the rear of the parcel. Again, I don't have recent counts with snow on the ground. I can't tell you how many spaces would be used up, but that would depend on the volume of snow that falls over a period of time.
To follow up, does the applicant know whether or not there's a condition of approval with respect to when the snow must be trucked off-site with respect to the volume of snow accumulated on the site?
There is no specific requirement, but it goes without saying that anybody who's running a shopping center is going to remove snow if there aren't parking spaces available for the customers in that shopping center. They do have snow shelf in the back where they can locate it. I know for a fact that they have trucks snow off. And who knows, maybe there'll be a lot more of that happening with, weather patterns changing. But I assure you that no one is going to sit there and allow any, neither Mr. Diadio nor the other owners of the center are going to allow those parking spaces to disappear for their employees and their clients. Otherwise, there's no sense being in business.
My recollection is over the years when we've had a lot of snow, though, I do remember seeing very unsightly snow piles in that corner of the parking lot.
Oh, I don't disagree. I can recall them being unsightly, but that's a different issue as to whether or not they are taking away parking that would otherwise be used. But it's not, it can be.
And they're quite large. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, I guess. My other question is, since the use is going to become more intensive for those seeking rehab services, are the number of handicap spaces in the parking lot on the upper level, are they going to increase in number?
Just again, you said the uses are going to be more intensive. I think they're going to be more luxurious, but they're not necessarily going to be more intensive. There's no increase in staff. It's just a nicer facility for people who are using the rehab facility. That said, I'll have to look at the applicant and see whether they think there's a need for any additional handicapped access spaces. I know whenever I've used that facility, I've not been able to park in a handicapped space, and many of the people who are in there don't necessarily qualify for being able to park in a handicapped space. But I don't think there's any reason that they have to provide more. And I'm looking at, Mr. Diadio would like to stand up and see if he can help me out with this one. You have to come up here to the microphone and identify yourself.
Peter Diadio, the owner of Polo West Hartford, owner of that property. And our handicap spaces, while they're very important, if you recall, they're not up against the sidewalk, up against the curb for the street. They're in the pool of parking. And they are oftentimes vacant because there's not enough handicapped folks to fill them. And there, in this application, there's no change in design in the parking lot at all. So we don't feel that this particular use created any additional need for handicap spaces. Then, of course, they would take away from the spaces that are already utilized by the retailer. And those existing handicap spaces already remain vacant quite often.
Thank you, Peter. And I did just check with Mr. Parents, who is, in charge and running the rehab area, and he underscored again, there's no increase in staff. They don't anticipate an increase in clientele. So as I said, it's really not an intensification of the use, it's just a relocation of the use.
Well, one could also say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a change in use, and the change in use is being that rehab services are being provided which are currently not being provided, and the people seeking those services, one could predict would need to park in a handicap space more so than somebody who's just coming in for a routine physical.
Pardon me?
Rehab's already there upstairs.
Yeah, that is true. Rehab is upstairs already, so it's just moving downstairs. Same.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear from what you're testimony is the number of patients coming for rehab in terms of the portion of the business is your testimony is that is not going to increase in terms of the percentage of people using that space.
There is no reason to anticipate that there would be. They're not increasing staff, so they can still only see the same number of people. And they've indicated to me, I'm not running the operation, but they've indicated to me that they do not anticipate an intensification of use of that facility. I would just like to leave you with the thought that before you consider requiring more handicap spaces, if that's something that you are considering, that the testimony of Mr. Diadio, I think, is very telling, which is that those spaces are currently often going unused, and that you do take away, you have the potential for depriving persons who don't qualify for handicapped space use from being able to park, even though they may have a sore hip or whatever, from being able to park as closely as possible to that space to use the services. So I leave you with that. You have to do what you want with regard to any conditions. We definitely do not believe any such requirement would be necessary and is not required by code provisions. At least staff has not indicated that any more are required.
It is clear that Mr. Allaire wants to share something with us.
I apologize. I received a message from Mr. Dumais, who asked me to announce that if anybody's here for the TP&Z meeting, and apparently one lady was, it's in room 400. So the rest of you pretty much look like you're in the right place, but I was asked to make that announcement.
Profound. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Ms. Casperson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only question is, it's exciting that you're going to have 6 new rooms. Do you think that in the future you're going to have any expanded services?
Well,
that might intensify the use. I think that was some of the question that Mr. Davidoff was getting.
The new exam rooms are in the doctor's office area.
Okay.
So that would be like if somebody took over doctor's offices in the Conover building. That in and of itself, a doctor's office use, if you have more examining rooms, doesn't trigger the need for more handicap parking. But it's certainly possible, and that's why the parking count goes up, that you could have more people coming to the doctor's offices because there are more exam rooms, so there might be fewer people waiting in the waiting in the lobby area to get in to see a doctor. So that's possible. But that's taken into account in the parking calculation. So that's accommodated already, and we still have that between that, I think it was 88 spaces against that 119 space deficit. So whether there are additional parking spaces, should that be way off, there's still an abundance of parking within the built-in deficit for this shopping center.
Great, thank you.
And we certainly can't find any more. There are no more places to put parking spaces.
Thank you, Mrs. Casperson. Okay, Mr. Davidoff.
With this change of use, are the hours of operation changing?
The hours of operation for the urgent care facility would be from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. The hours for the medical office building, and I did write it down, will actually be reduced from what they are now because they're able to separate out the urgent care use. But for urgent care, the maximum would be 8 to 8.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anything else? So I just wanted a couple of questions. There's no parking in the back of the building at all that's being striped or?
Nothing's changing.
Nothing's changing. There are a few spaces there.
There are, and they're being used right now, and as I'll get into when I talk about our outreach and some of the concerns neighboring property owners had, the property owners, particularly Mr. Udoff, wants to make sure there's no other incentive or pressure put on those parking spaces in the rear.
Okay. And the wall between, so Anytime Fitness is now pushed to the back wall.
Just their office area.
Just the offices. Right. The entryway and the egress and entry there is there, it looked like there were two on our, it's hard to say where that leads. There's a little doors that look like they're leading out, but where do they go?
There is no change to their existing entrance to Anytime Fitness. So there's, if you look at this plan I just submitted, I'm showing you right now, this is basically the outline of the Anytime Fitness facility. It runs from front to back on the lower level on this side, and the doors are back here. And those doors, you still have access into the facility, and I believe there's another access way in here. There's no change. And they have an egress door here for another means of egress. It's not signed for access. That's back there also. So nothing changes. No changes in the access to Anytime Fitness. To get to the office area, you still will go through. Previously, you went through the Anytime Fitness space to get to their office, you went down here. Now, to get to their office, you'll go through this door right here and into their office here.
Okay, that's helpful. I didn't see that door in the corridor when I first looked at it. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I had. Any other questions? Okay, the outreach, you were going to talk about the outreach.
Yes, and I just want to make one other comment. The Town Plan and Zoning Commission did ask in its recommendation that staff parking be restricted to outlying areas of the parking lots in an effort to free parking closer to the building for patients, customers, and visitors to the plaza. And in the supplemental filing that you received on 9/1, we attached a 1999, or excerpts from it, a 1999 cross-parking and access easement agreement, which is recorded on the land records between the various owners, and it specifies in there that between the owners of the parcel, they agree that employee parking will be on the perimeter up by North Main Street and not in other areas. So pertinent sections of that agreement I did attach. And for the record, Hartford Healthcare Medical Group has indicated it specifically requests its employees already to park close to North Main Street and no closer than in the far ends of the parking aisles in front of Whole Foods, and it hereby commits to continuing to so require its employees to park on the western and southern perimeter of the upper parking lot, which is facing Marshall's and towards the Walgreens side of the parking lot. So that's it for parking on our presentation. I'd just like to quickly go through staff and agency reviews. Again, in that supplemental filing, we listed for you all the various communications from staff. The West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, July 25, 2017, you received the letter from Steve Huliet saying sewer service adequacy review as required by 17744C is complete. We did not have that ready for you at the time of application, so it's now in your record. You did receive the Design Review Advisory Committee, a unanimous positive recommendation, finding the application consistent with the committee's performance review criteria. That's dated August 14th. You have a town engineer memorandum, July 14th, where he finds the application acceptable. I've already discussed with you the TP&Z recommendation, which was positive. And police and fire department emails expressing no concerns were issued on July 13th and July 14th, respectively. The zoning enforcement officer's comments, we've also already discussed, July 21, 2017, where he suggests we secure a waiver, which we are asking you for. You now have the August 31st Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association minutes of the meeting, and I'll discuss that under outreach. And I see by the end of the day, unless you have something I did not receive, that you do not have written town planner comments. But I did talk with Todd Dumais earlier this afternoon. If you don't have them, what he said to me was that he would try and get a clean bill of health from the planning office into your package, but he wasn't sure he could get it done today. He said I could represent to you that he had no issues with the application, or the planning department has no issues with the application. So with regard to outreach, we indicated in the application filing that we were proposing a July 26th open house that would be sponsored by the applicants at the facility. The mailing did go out. From the photographs I thought were kind of cute that were given to me, I just thought I'd pass them on to you. No one came. Not unusual, not that we necessarily expected people would. But we did, in the mailing that was sent out, indicate that if anybody had any concerns, they were given telephone numbers that they could contact. And as of today, no one has contacted the applicant with regard to any concerns about this application. The only person who expressed any concern was Robert Udoff. And I forget the legal entity, but Mr. Udoff, through his company, owns the abutting property where the Crown Market is located, and they share a common access way. And what he shared with me was, and they've been here and opposed applications in the past for the Anytime Fitness facility and for its expansion. There were some rather controversial applications before this town council, before that was able to get approved. Their concern is pressure on parking spaces for people who visit Crown or any of the other retailers in that facility. So my initial discussion with him, we went through the application itself, and I explained to him how the signage was up front at the upper level, that there'd be no reason for people to think that they could get into the rehab center but for or only if they go through the main entrance to the upper level rehab Hartford Healthcare Medical Group facility. So the signage clearly directs them that way. And you've already heard that they commit to not allowing any of their employees to park in back and requiring them to park on the upper level. He seemed to be okay, and then I heard from his attorney, which always, is an indication that someone is really interested in how this is going to play out and whether this is an acceptable application to them. So he retained, he had originally said he was going to be okay with this, but he did retain counsel. And I spoke on several occasions with Attorney Michael O'Connell, Atmore and Morris, and I provided him with the application materials and then with the supplemental materials that we filed. And what he asked for as of yesterday was additional notations on the lower level layout plan that we therefore filed this plan with you. So the notations say, new egress corridor to exterior exit, egress only, and second egress. And I've highlighted where those are, those notations on the 9/5, September 5th plan that you now have. So he asked that those be put on there also to further emphasize that that is only a secondary means of egress and is not meant to be an access corridor. There'll be no signage on the exterior of the building there. So we made that change, and we forwarded it to Attorney O'Connell, and he has authorized me to report to you that his client is comfortable with the plan as a solution to his concerns. So I am doing that, and that is the only other entity that we heard from. I did talk with Conover at the time we made the application, and they expressed satisfaction and were pleased. We copied them on everything. So then the final outreach effort was with Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association, and that meeting I described for you. The report, my client said that at that meeting, the members of the Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association were positive and expressed appreciation for the services Hartford Healthcare Medical Group provides to the neighborhood and support for the expansion of those services. And the minutes that you've since received state, the Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association is pleased to support the proposed project. There were no objections to the project, and they did ask that the applicant be aware of and mitigate potential noise created by contractors when bringing building material debris from inside to the outdoor dumpsters. And the applicant, I will tell you, I'm authorized to say that the applicant commits to being mindful of this issue and will remind its contractors to be careful and mindful of this particular concern when they're taking stuff out and dumping it into the dumpsters. And finally, the Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association minutes that you have dated August 31 wished the applicant luck in its venture. So altogether, a very positive review by both outside agencies and outside groups and property owners. I won't go through it. I've included it in my application filing, but I list the ways by which this application meets all of your SDD standards. I think the most important thing is clearly these are uses that are already existing in the shopping center. There's no additional change to the buildings or to the site plan layout. The signage change is minor. I don't think anyone can reasonably argue that what's being proposed is going to have a negative impact in any way on the surrounding neighborhoods and properties. So we believe, and also as an existing special development district for which no additional building area is proposed, the total density of development in terms of floor space and land coverage complies with the standards of the underlying district. So for all those reasons, and given the information that we've put on the record for you, we certainly hope that you will be able to approve this application. I know everyone is interested in proceeding very quickly on this. So thank you very much, and we'll answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. I had one quick question on operations while the construction's going on. Is it going to remain open, and will it be sectioned off in certain areas? Will the urgent care be how will that construction
I am going
process
to ask someone else to answer that question. So with regard to the Hartford Healthcare area construction, are you able to do that, Jennifer? Identify yourself for the record and just...
Thank you. Jennifer Murnane, for the record. I'm the project manager, construction manager. So the construction's going to take place in about 6 different phases to keep all 3 businesses open at the same time. So the first thing that's going to happen is a very small renovation in our space, which will allow us to make room for the urgent care, Go Health Urgent Care, to build their space. Once that happens, in the same time frame, Peter's going to be moving Anytime Fitness down below. Once that's complete, we'll start building out rehab. When rehab is complete downstairs, we will move rehab from downstairs and then complete there. So I think there's phases A through F, and it will take quite some time, significant months from start to finish, with multiple permit applications and different things. So we will be, because it will be an active patient care during the entire time, our contractors take extra care to have our partitions be fully to the deck, to provide no dust, to make sure all of our environments remain completely safe for patients. A lot of the work will be done at nights, too.
Inside quiet work will be done in the evening, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Davidoff?
Do we have an estimated cost of what these improvements are to?
We do. Well, I have an estimated cost of what my improvements are, and Peter has an estimated cost of what his improvements are.
Would
you wanna
care
know?
to share what the reinvestment in the community is?
From Hartford Healthcare, it's about 1.4 million.
All right, thank you.
That's not including Peter's work, building the stair and the elevator, moving Anytime Fitness. So that's in addition to the 1.4.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Any more questions? Is there a sign-up sheet? Is anybody signed up? Well, yeah, you're right. I didn't know if anyone signed up that we should, yeah. Okay. So I will read in for the record, which I think you already mentioned, but I will just read it in to make sure it's there. Letter dated August 11, 2017 from TPZ recommending approval, and letter dated August 14, 2017 from DRAC recommending approval. If there's no further questions, we will close the public hearing. And he's not. Oh, where's Barn when you need him? Okay, I would like to call the town council meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, roll call, Ms. LeBreau.
Mr. Barnes is absent, but we have Mr. Flynn sitting in on the hearing. Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Ms. Casperson?
Present.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Mr. Dodge?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan? Mr. Winograd? And Mr. Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Flynn. We are not going to do a public forum because this was the subject of the only thing on the agenda, subject to a formal public hearing. There's nobody here, so I don't really need to go into it. But it is a special town council meeting just for this approval. So, item 1, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we approve an application STD number 7-R117 on behalf of HHC Physicians Care, Inc., doing business as Hartford Healthcare Medical Group, lessee, and Polo West Hartford LLC, lessor, owner, Robin Messier Pearson, attorney, for a request to amend Special Development District Number 7 located at 324-348 North Main Street and 2495 Albany Avenue, West Hartford, to convert approximately 3,500 square feet of the lower level of the Whole Foods Market Building from storage to office and physical rehabilitation use.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there anyone that would like to comment on the application? Okay,
Sure.
if not, okay.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Are we going to
Ms. Carey,
vote right
go-
after that?
Yes, well,
Okay. I just want to say, I mean, how lucky are we that we have someone that's willing to invest 1.4 million plus Peter? I happen to be at the meeting where Peter Adadio presented before the Bishop's Corner Neighborhood Association, this plan, and those folks, also, how lucky are we that we have folks that live in town, residents, businesses, that attend these, because they have a vested interest in what happens to them when they go get bagels, or go for Mexican food, or going grocery shopping. They had a lot of questions, they were all answered, and everyone was happy that their corner of West Hartford is moving forward. So I just want to thank you. I'll certainly be supporting this. I just think it's wonderful. And the individual who's most affected is Scott in Anytime Fitness, because he's being displaced, and he's all in favor of it. So when you add that to the, our local town people, Dwayne and Todd, it's just fabulous. I'm excited. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kerrigan. I could feel your excitement. Is there any more comments? So I want to thank the applicant. Mrs. Pearson, thank you again for a very thorough presentation. This sounds like a wonderful improvement. I mean, I remember when this was service merchandise in the back and you would wait for your conveyor belt item. And then it became storage and was not used for a very long time. And this looks like a great use of space without an intensity that will burden other businesses around it. And I also want to thank Scott from Anytime Fitness for your flexibility in accommodating this improvement. And it will be a wonderful addition to our community to allow for improved rehabilitation services. I also appreciate the fact, I know it's more expensive when you're doing a phased improvement with operations staying open and patients, and I don't take that lightly. I think that's a really wonderful commitment to the neighborhood, to your customers, and I appreciate that, and I know it is a more expensive process and a more timely, more time-extensive process. So I appreciate that. And with that, I will be supporting, but we're going to do a roll call vote. Does anybody else? Oh, yes, the signage, yes, we need to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think as part of our motion to adopt the waiver of the sign design standard, I think that should be, I'm offering as a friendly amendment that we adopt that.
Second?
Okay, so we're going to vote on that first. So motion's been made and seconded to adopt the sign waiver. Do we need a roll call for that, or can we do a? No. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries, and then we will do
And
a
then
roll.
I'd like to speak on the motion.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. People often ask me, why do I even bother asking a lot of questions during this hearing? What I like to do is get information on the record with respect to snow shelf parking, handicap parking, hours of operation, understanding the scope of the project. And I think by asking those type of inquiries, we get a better flavor of the application that was presented this evening. Attorney Pearson, in her norm, did a great job presenting the facts from her angle, but there's always some things that you want to get on the record from my angle that I think are important. It may sound as though they're confrontational, but I would say that, in my opinion, they're helpful. I think, as some of my colleagues have mentioned already, the significant investment or reinvestment in our community is something that we ought to be proud of here in West Hartford. Many people who are looking at changes in use could easily move their operations to a place that could accommodate them much more easily. But that would not really serve the members of our community. And I think what you've done is shown that you're committed to our town and to its residents in the north corner of our community. And I think that that's very important as people seek healthcare alternatives for care that doesn't require them to go into the metropolitan area, and that seems to be the norm in the healthcare industry currently. So for all those reasons, I will be supporting the application this evening, and I do think that some of my comments made this evening were heard, and should they be concerns with respect to the snow shelf, or should it be a concern as to the parking demands by those who are unable to access the building from a parking space close to it, I'm certain that the landlord will take the affirmative steps necessary to address those concerns to make it a win-win project overall. So once again, thank you for a good application. I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. And we'll go for a roll call. Okay, Ms. LeBrun?
Mr. Flynn? Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Ms. Casperson?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan? Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Now, we have, thank you very much, and best of luck to you. Yes. We also have numbers 2 and 3 that we need to receive. So I'll make a motion, you can second. Receipt of letter from Town Planning and Zoning, read 324, 348 North Main Street and 2495 Albany Avenue, recommending approval, and receipt of letter from Design Review Advisory Committee, 324, 328 North Main Street, 2495 Albany Avenue, recommending approval. I think we've already done that through the public hearing, but I just want to make sure we did that.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next motion is to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Good night.